There is a bait that will outfish almost anything in your tackle box. It does not come from a fancy shop. It does not cost $20 a bag. It has no secret flavor a company charges you for. It sits on the shelf at every grocery store in America, and it costs about $1 a can. It is corn. Plain, yellow corn. And here is the part most anglers never stop to consider. While they are spending a fortune on boilies and pellets and bottles of scent, the carp swimming right past all of it would rather eat a kernel of corn than almost anything else in the water. I am not here to sell you anything. I have nothing to sell. I only want to hand you what old-timers have known for 100 years, back before the tackle industry learned how to empty a man's wallet. And I am going to give you the whole of it today, start to finish. Why the corn works, which corn to buy, how to cook it and how to load it with scent for almost nothing, how to put it on the hook the right way, how to set your line, where to fish it, and how to land the fish once it is on. By the end of these next 20 minutes, you will know everything you need to walk down to the water with $1 can of corn and come home with a carp. So stay with me, because every piece of this matters, and I am going to give it to you in order. Let us start where it all begins, with why the corn works at all. A carp is a bottom feeder. It spends its whole life rooting along the mud and the silt, sucking things in and blowing them back out, sorting the food from the grit with a mouth built for exactly that. It does not chase, it grazes. And what it is grazing for is anything small, soft, and full of energy. Now look at a kernel of corn. It is soft, it is sweet, packed with the sugar and starch a carp is built to hunt for. And it is bright, glowing yellow, the easiest thing in the world to see down in the gloom where a carp feeds. A carp also has a sense of taste and smell far sharper than yours. It can find food it cannot even see, by scent alone, drifting on the current. So when you put corn in the water, you are not just showing the fish a meal. You are ringing a bell it was born to answer. That is your whole advantage, and it costs you next to nothing. Now, not all corn is the same, and a little knowing here saves you money and saves the fish, both. The simplest corn, and the best place for any beginner to start, is a plain can of sweet corn from the grocery store. The yellow kind in water, nothing fancy. You open the can and it is ready. Nothing to cook, nothing to soak. This is your hook bait, the corn that goes right on your line, and one can will fish you a whole afternoon with plenty left to scatter. Buy the cheap store brand. The carp has never once checked the label, and the cheap can and the expensive can came off the very same field. The second kind is field corn, sometimes called feed corn or maize, the hard dry corn they sell in big sacks meant for animals. This is the secret of the man who fishes a lot without spending much, because a sack of it costs almost nothing and lasts you a whole season of baiting. But hear me on this, because it truly matters. You cannot use field corn dry and hard the way it pours out of the sack. Dry maize is like a little stone. A carp will swallow it, and it can swell up inside the fish and do real harm. It has to be prepared first, always, with no shortcuts. And preparing it could not be simpler. You take your dry corn and you cover it with plenty of water, because it is going to drink and swell. And you let it soak a full day, 24 hours, until every kernel has gone fat and plump. Then you tip it into a pot, water and all, and you boil it, gently, for a good while, until you can take one kernel and squash it easily flat between 2 fingers. That is your test. Soft enough to crush between finger and thumb, and it is ready, not before. Some men take it one step further and let the cooked corn sit in a sealed bucket for a few days after that, until it turns and ferments and goes a little sour and sharp smelling. It looks like something you would never eat yourself, and the carp cannot get enough of it, because that strong smell calls them in from far across the lake. But you do not need to ferment it to catch fish. Soaked and boiled soft is plenty. Dry and hard is never. Remember that one line and you will never go wrong. And while we are on the pot, let me hand you the upgrade that costs pennies and turns an ordinary can of corn into something the fish come running for. Because here is a truth the bait companies would rather you did not know. Half of what you pay for in those expensive baits is nothing but sweetener, scent, and coloring. And you can add all three to your own corn at home for almost nothing. Do it while the corn is soaking or cooking, when it drinks everything up. For sweetness, and carp have a powerful sweet tooth, stir in plain white sugar or a spoon of molasses or honey. For scent, a splash of vanilla works wonders, and so do the cheap fruit flavorings from the baking aisle, strawberry above all. Even a good spoon of salt makes corn a carp cannot leave alone. And for color, if the water you fish is stained or muddy, a few drops of food coloring will turn your kernels a bright red or a deep orange that stands out down there like a beacon, or a pinch of turmeric will burn them a yellow you can see from the bank. You are doing in your own kitchen exactly what the $20 bag does. You are just keeping the $19. So that is your bait sorted. A can of sweet corn for the hook. A sack of prepared field corn for feeding the water. Sweetened and scented if you like. Now comes the part that actually catches the fish, and this is where most folks quietly go wrong. Let us talk about the hook. The easy way, the way you likely already picture in your head, is to thread the kernel straight onto the hook. You push the hook point through 2 or 3 kernels, leave just a little of the point showing at the end, and you are fishing. It works. Carp have been caught that way since corn came in a can. If you are on the bank today, and you only want the simplest thing, do that and you will catch fish. But there is a better way, and it is the single trick that will double your catch, and once you learn it, you will never go back. It is called the hair rig. Instead of burying the hook inside the corn, you tie a short little thread off the bend of the hook, a fine line an inch or so long, and this thread is called the hair. You slide your corn onto the hair, not onto the hook, so the corn hangs just below a bare, clean hook. Now think about what happens down there. The carp comes along, sucks in the corn the way it sucks in everything, and there is nothing hard hidden inside the bait to make it feel wrong. The bait behaves natural, so the fish takes it with full confidence. And the moment the fish tries to blow it back out, that bare hook, hanging right there, catches and slides straight into the corner of its lip and holds. That one change, moving the corn off the hook and onto a hair, is the whole difference between the fish that mouth your bait and swim off, and the fish that end up in your net. Learn the hair rig. It is worth more than any bait in the shop. For the hook itself, you do not need much. A strong, short hook in a middling size, something around a size 8, is right for 2 or 3 kernels of corn. Sharp is what matters most. Run the point across your thumbnail, and if it does not bite and drag, throw it away and tie a fresh one, because a dull hook loses the fish of the day. And here is one more small thing on the bait, and it is a good one. They make fake corn, plastic corn, that floats. Slide a single piece of that onto your hair along with your real kernels, and it lifts the whole bait up off the bottom, just a little, right up where a cruising carp can see it, instead of letting it sink down and disappear into soft silt or weed. On a clean, hard bottom you may not need it, but over mud, over leaves, over weed, that little float can be the difference between a bait the fish find and a bait they never knew was there. A couple of dollars buys a bag that lasts you years. So the bait is on the hair, the hook is sharp. Now let us put it out there. And there are a few simple ways to do it, and you can pick the one that suits your water. The plainest setup of all is the running legger. You slide a weight onto your main line, small enough to cast easy, but heavy enough to hold the bottom, and below it you tie on your hook and hair. The weight pins your corn to the bottom where the carp feeds, and because the line runs freely through the weight, when a fish picks up the bait it feels no resistance and keeps moving. Simple, cheap, and it catches everywhere. The next step up is the method feeder. This is a small weighted cage that you press a ball of your corn and ground bait around, with your hook bait tucked right into it. You cast the whole parcel out, it settles on the bottom, and it breaks down into a neat little pile of feed with your hook kernel sitting dead center. The fish moves in to clean up the pile and takes your bait almost by accident. On a hard-fished water, the method feeder is deadly. There is also the little mesh bag, the PVA bag, made of a material that dissolves in water. You fill it with corn, tie your hook inside, and cast it out. Down it goes. The bag melts away in a minute or two, and it leaves your hook bait sitting in a perfect little pile of free corn every single cast. And do not forget the oldest way of all, right at your feet. Carp love to patrol the margins, the shallow water tight to the bank. And often you can simply lower a bait down the edge under a float, or with no more than a single weight, and take a fish from water so close you could touch it with the rod tip. Now, whichever way you choose to cast it, here is the step the impatient man skips and the wise man never does. Before you settle in, you feed the swim. Take a couple of handfuls of your prepared corn and scatter them across the patch of water you mean to fish. This is called baiting up, and it is the closest thing to magic in all of fishing. Understand, you are not feeding the fish instead of catching them. You are drawing them in and putting them in the mood. The carp find that scattered corn on the bottom, and they move in, and they begin to root and graze, greedy and busy and no longer careful. And sitting right there in the middle of the free meal is your one kernel, the one on the hair, looking exactly like all the rest. That last part is the secret within the secret. Match your hook bait to what you scattered. If you fed plain yellow corn, hook plain yellow corn. If you fed sweet red corn, hook sweet red corn. Make yours look like just one more piece of the feast, and the carp will pick it up without a moment's suspicion. How much do you feed? Less than you think, and more often. A big carp can fill its belly and drift off, and if it fills up on your free corn and never finds the hook, you have fed it, not caught it. So bait light, a handful or two to start, and top it up now and again through the day to keep them interested and hungry. Little and often. And if you can, bait the very same spot for a day or two before you even fish it. The carp learn there is easy food at that spot, and they come back looking for it. And then you are simply waiting for them at the dinner table. One word of care before you throw corn in any water. Some lakes and some states have rules about baiting and chumming, and a few do not allow it at all, or only allow certain baits. It takes 2 minutes to check the rules where you fish, and it keeps you right with the law and right with the water, and everyone who fishes it after you. Do that first always. So now you know the bait, the hook, the rig, and the feeding. Let us talk about where and when, because the finest bait in the world is worthless in the wrong spot. Learn to read the water. Carp give themselves away if you watch. Look for little strings of bubbles rising to the surface, because a feeding carp rooting in the mud sends up bubbles as it goes. Look for fish rolling, a back or a tail breaking the surface. Look for a patch of water gone suddenly cloudy and colored, because that is a carp stirring up the bottom as it feeds. Where you see those signs, that is where the fish are, and that is where your corn should be. And when you cannot see them, fish the places they love. Carp hold near cover and near features, a fallen tree in the water, a bed of reeds or lily pads, an overhanging bush throwing shade, the edge of a weed bed, a gravel bar the mouth of a bay. And do not overlook the margins right under your own bank, because the biggest, warest old carp in the lake will often cruise the very edge where nobody thinks to drop a bait. Fish love an edge, any edge, the place where one thing becomes another. Carp also love warmth, so let the weather guide you. Your best fishing runs from late spring through the warm heart of summer, when the water is warm and the fish are feeding hard to build themselves up. The first hours after dawn and the last hour of light before dark are golden, when the fish move up to feed in the low light. A warm, overcast day can fish well all day long, and a warm wind pushing into a bank is a gift. because it pushes the food and the warm surface water to that end of the lake, and the carp follow it. Fish with the wind in your face, uncomfortable as it is, and you are often fishing where the fish are. And here is something that costs nothing and catches more fish than any bait. Be quiet. A carp can feel your footsteps drumming through the ground, and hear a tackle box dropped on the bank, and it will melt away before you ever make a cast. Walk soft. Set your gear down gentle. Keep low against the skyline near the water's edge. You are hunting a careful animal, so move like a careful man. Your gear itself can stay plain and cheap. A medium, sturdy rod with some backbone, because a good carp is strong and will bend it double. A reel loaded with reliable line, somewhere around 10 to 15 pounds, because you may hook a fish far heavier than you expect. Your hook, your weight, your hair. And 2 things I will ask you not to skip, for the fish's sake as much as yours. A big, soft landing net, because you cannot lift a carp out by the line without hurting it. And something soft to lay it on while you unhook it. A wet mat or even a folded wet towel on the grass. That is a day's carp fishing. You do not need the $1,000 setup the glossy magazines are selling you. You need corn, a sharp hook, and a little patience. So you have baited your spot, and you cast your hook bait right into the middle of it, and you set the rod down. And now comes the hardest part of the whole business. You wait, leave the line just a touch slack, and watch your rod tip, or watch where the line meets the water. A carp does not nibble politely like a little fish. It grazes in, it takes your kernel, it turns to move off. And when it does, that rod tip is going to wrap right round, or that line is going to tear off tight. And here is where the excited man loses the fish. Do not yank. Do not haul back with all your might. You lift the rod up firm and smooth and sweep it back steady. And you let that sharp hook do its work and find its hold in the corner of the mouth. Firm and smooth, never a violent jerk. And once that fish is on, the fight begins, and a carp fights like few things in fresh water. Do not try to drag it straight in. It will make strong runs, and you must let it run. Let your line slip against the reel's drag so nothing snaps, and then gain your line back gently when it tires. Keep your rod up, keep a steady bend in it, and stay patient. Little by little the fish will tire and roll, and you draw it over the waiting net and lift. Never lift a carp out on the line alone. Then treat the fish right, because a carp caught with care can be caught again by the next man, and by you next season. Wet your hands before you touch it, always so you do not strip the protective slime from its body. Lay it on that wet mat. Slip the hook out gently, and a sharp hook usually sits neat in the lip and comes free easy. If you want a photograph, keep the fish low over the mat. Support its whole weight with 2 wet hands, one under the front and one under the tail, and be quick. Then lower it back into the water and hold it upright until it kicks and swims off strong under its own power. You have taken nothing from the water but a memory, and you have left a fish for another day. Let me hand you the whole of it now, said Plain, so it sits in your mind when you walk to the water. Feed the swim with cheap corn. Hang your hook bait off a hair below a sharp bare hook and match it to the freebies. Read the water and fish the edges and the features where carp live. Bait light and often, keep quiet on the bank and wait. When it takes, sweep firm and smooth. Let it run, net it, and set it back with wet hands. There is no secret bottle. There never was. There is only a can of corn and a man who has learned how to use it. And now that man is you. Now, corn will fill your net all summer long, that I promise you. But there is one more bait, an old country bait even cheaper than corn, that the biggest and oldest carp in the lake love above all else. The bait the wise old anglers reach for when they want the fish of a lifetime. Most people have walked past it 1,000 times, and never once thought to thread it on a hook. That is where I will take you next. Stay with me, and I will show you what it is.